Welcome back to another episode of Future Dreamers. I'm really excited for this episode because it gets into the heart of why I love astrology so much and how astrology is a tactical, practical, logistical tool for living your dream life. And so, what is that topic? We're going to talk about astrology and cycles. Specifically, we're going to talk about how the moon, that beautiful cosmic body, which is one of the most intimate relationships that humans have in terms of the cosmological planetary world, is an initiatrix into the entire schema of cycles from the top to the bottom. What she can teach us is such a beautiful doorway to understanding cycles at every level, down to your emotional level and all the way up into the grand scheme of things that humans often forget that we are a part of. So I'm going to title this episode like The Moon as Our Greatest Teacher of Cycles. She is an initiatrix into the time wave of collective evolution. Like, bam. That's a sexy title because it's a sexy subject. So to kind of open us up into this topic, I'm going to start with a little soliloquy on why I think astrology is so important in this time that we are living in right now. And if you're watching this in 1,000 years, I mean, we are going through it. Not as much as maybe we were in the time of like the bubonic plague or some shit. Hopefully y'all still have the National Geographics from back in those days. But now is a critical time in the evolution of humanity at a collective level, and why I think that as individuals, I think we forget that we have a huge impact on the global world, and it might not be visible in our lifetimes, but what I mean by that is we have more opportunity and agency than ever to change our individual lives through the prism of our inner worlds. Discovering self-love, this will be a whole nother topic, but discovering self-love is such a way to sink an anchor, or sink your roots into, the soil of the earth and stabilize yourself as we live through these chaotic times. And so that is why I think astrology is such a critical, sacred, and tactical tool for just being alive now and being a change maker. So we live in chaotic times. If you open your phone, I mean, shit is popping off, like not in a good way. But at the same time, we have more tools than ever to make change, but it could really go either way. So how do we make change in the right direction? How do we make change in the direction of humanity's highest story of collective evolution? Well, we do that in our own inner worlds first. And so astrology, if you've ever heard the magical axiom, as above, so below, using the macrocosm as a time map, as a map of patterns to understand our inner worlds and the events of our lives as individuals, that is why astrology is such a powerful tool. It's a cosmic GPS. It's not a predicting tool, and it isn't some book of fate. Just the same way that when an acorn is dropped by an oak tree, there's no guarantee that that acorn is going to become a massive mother oak. It takes cultivating, and it takes, the universe being kind of the X factor story writer in collaboration. And so astrology is this opportunity to understand our internal natures through the planets as our archetypal guides to understanding our psyches, because all of our psyches are different. Nobody was dealt the same hand of cards when it pertains to your inner world. And so having a framework that which your birth chart is an entry point into this level of understanding of how your psyche works. And as one of my teachers, John Churchill, says, beliefs are psychoactive. So if you can construct a beautiful mandala of the way that your inner world works, that shit is going to hold you through chaos. And as we're going to explore in the next 10 minutes, astrology helps us understand cycles at the deepest level of time, all the way down to the very quick cycles that your emotional world is moving through. And the moon is our initiatrix. She is going to hold our hand as we understand all of these cycles. So let's talk a little bit about sacred geometry. I'm going to leave 2 YouTube links to 1-minute, really quick videos that really visually show you like what we are all living through as humans on planet Earth. The Earth is not as we know, the Earth is constantly rotating on its axis, and we know the Earth moves around the sun, but the sun isn't staying in the same place either. Like the moon is moving around the Earth, the Earth is moving around the sun. All of the planets are moving around the sun in our solar system, and our solar system is blasting through the universe, spinning around our galaxy. So I'm going to leave you one video that's so badass. It just like in picture format, like through computer generated graphics, like shows you that whole dance. It's absolutely wild. And so one solar system revolution around the galaxy is called a great year. Wow. Like that's just amazing. It takes more than 200 million years for our solar system, our sun, our star to move around the galaxy. Just incredible to think about time at that level of scale. The next video I'm going to leave you a link to is called The Dance of the Planets. And this particular one is the dance of Earth and Venus as it moves around the sun through their full orbital cycle. So it uses computer generated graphics to draw the actual orbital paths of both planets around the sun. And what does it draw? It draws a sacred mandala. Astrology is a system of studying the sacred geometry of the movements of the cosmic bodies. So really, math is the language of the universe. But math is hard to understand if you don't assign meaning to it. And so astrology, being a study of the archetypal relationships of the cosmic bodies throughout their path of being in relationship through many, many, many cycles together, is a way to understand the story of the evolution of the universe. And because we have this situation going on where the macrocosm is a mirror of the microcosm, you can understand the coherence of your inner world and your individual life through looking to higher levels of coherence in the macrocosm. What that allows us to understand is that our story is part and parcel. You are a part of the whole in the story of collective evolution, and you can get more understanding of how to live coherently in your story as we participate in the collective coherence or trying to find collective coherence. And I get that that can be like, dude, that's really hard to like figure out like how I play into all of that with the chaos that might be going on in your inner world. If you're having mean girl or mean guy thoughts in your brain, I totally sympathize with that because I have, had that lifelong struggle, throughout the duration of my 4.2 decades. But understanding emotional mastery, which is going to be one of the main 3 topics we talk about and expand in this podcast, will help you deal with that. And we are all participating in multiple levels of cycles where we get to continue practicing finding coherence. And just imagine for me for a second, if someone were able to tell you, this is what I'm telling you, that you could have a system that would allow you to find inner coherence, to find inner peace, because you know how to manage your inner world. You know who your archetypal psychic allies are because you understand the different emotional functions of your psyche, your psychology, how your brain works. And then you could connect the board of directors of your psyche, which is really what your birth chart is if you understand it. But your birth chart is also telling you a story that unfolds through your experience in life. And as you play and experience different tragedies, different traumas, different periods of support, different beauties, different love in different aspects of your life, they all build on each other to help turn you into a greater creator being. And then when you understand that as you grow in your capacity to be a more loving, creative being in the universe, you're starting to connect your psyche to your heart. So you're developing this heart-mind connection. And as you become a greater creator in your world, you begin to have more agency and power to create on the collective scale. It's fucking cool as shit. It's mystical living. And that's the lifestyle I've been initiating myself and practicing over the last 2 years as I've been developing Star Ally. And so what this really allows us to understand is that there is a relationship between the cosmos and psyche. Cosmos and Psyche was a fascinating book written by Richard Tarnas, a super deep thinker, like Harvard or Yale professor, OG psychonaut from the 60s and 70s. He understood with Stanislav Grof, the creator of breathwork, that there is, and both of them were psychologists who studied how by studying LSD trips in, I think they did this in the 70s. I'll leave a link to this book as well and some of their talks so that you can get this information straight from them. But they realized that they looked through all kinds of psychology books after people would have psychedelic journeys, and then they would try and find, like, how can we understand the archetypal, the meaning of what their journey was like when they, came out of their journey, and did counseling sessions to understand it. And they couldn't find anything in traditional psychology. And both of these were like high level, PhDs, and like these aren't just like armchair psychologists. What they found was that astrology was how they were able to make sense of the archetypal meanings of these individual psychedelic journeys. So Richard Tarnas wrote a book called Cosmos and Psyche, and how there are archetypal correlations between what is going on with the cosmic bodies and the archetypal roles that they represent, and greater patterns of human events, as well as deeply personal individual events. And so we're gonna talk about what that means for you from a practical level. And so as we enter deeper into this conversation, I want to kind of bring before you the idea of time and its different facets. So we're going to talk about what is objective time, what is subjective time, and what is collective time. So the first one, objective time. This is clock time. I'm not wearing a watch, but this is the time that we all move along together so that we can stay in collective coherence. Your job starts at 9 a.m. You hopefully get to leave by at least 5 p.m. You know that you need to feed your cats at like whatever p.m. You know that the calendar, I mean, we work on the Gregorian calendar. It would be a lot cooler if we worked on a calendar that actually matched the cosmos. Maybe we could move to a lunar calendar one day. But in essence, we have a objectively recognizable system of time that is matched to the cosmic bodies. And so that's kind of just like how we move as a collective globe, as a society. No one's really arguing whether it's 5:05 p.m. or 5:06 p.m. because we're all going to check our phones, and we're all reading off the same clock, literally. The second type of time, though, is subjective time. This is how you experience emotional processes, deeper processes of the unfoldment of your consciousness that can't really be timed according to the clock. This might be you're in a season of some type of winter that might last like a few days, a few weeks. You might need rest for a certain period, and that might not map to exactly like the winter that's going on for the clock. It's something that's within you. It's your own individual processes as is felt by your emotional body. And again, it refers to your moods, but it also refers to the moods of your conscious evolution. You could be in a springtime of your consciousness and feel extremely creative for months at a time. And then you might move into a place where you've expended that flavor of energy, and now you're moving into a more autumn phase. So sometimes there can be tension and conflict between the objective time that society, your family, your work, your job, your clients are working with, and the subjective time of your inner world that is processing emotions that may not be easily describable to others, but there's a process working on within you. We're going to talk about how you can use astrology to better understand subjective time and better consciously work with the subjective processes that you are going through in your inner world, and make the most of them so that you really juice that opportunity for all it's worth, in service of becoming a higher level creator being. And then we're going to talk a little bit about collective time. So collective time is like taking subjective time and blowing it out to like a more exponential level, where we're actually starting to talk about deep time. So there's two topics I want to bring up to make this feel a little more real to you. And maybe I'll leave links to this stuff too so that you can get it's crazy fascinating for me as an astrologer. But you may or may not have heard of something called the precession of the equinoxes. So you've probably heard, oh, we're moving into the age of Aquarius. What does that mean? What are they talking about? Age of Aquarius. And you may have heard, oh, well, we are moving out of the age of Pisces. And so if you probably know that one of the reasons we have seasons is because the Earth is moving on an axis. And as it moves backwards on this spiralic axis like a top, the spot that the sun rises at on the vernal equinox, the spring equinox, lines up to a zodiacal constellation. But that point is not fixed. If you've ever watched Ancient Aliens, big up to Giorgio Tsoukalos, one of my all-time heroes. I feel like all the dudes on Ancient Aliens are like my uncles that I like wish were my real uncles, but they're not. But I can watch them on, Netflix or whatever. So Ancient Aliens like is such a hilariously fun show. It's like a massage for my brain, where they talk about how so many of the pyramidal structures and big. You might have just heard some cats fighting in the back. We have a new feral cat, Minnow, who is integrating into our larger cat family, and sometimes he beefs with Scumpy and our other cats. Maybe I'll cut this out, maybe I won't. But back to these megalithic structures that ancient humans built. They were always aligning them to bodies in the cosmos, whether it be to star systems or to zodiacal constellations. And they kept time. They kept deep time through marking like highly mathematically accurate points of megalithic structures to places in the cosmos. So the precession of the equinoxes, basically what it's explaining is that as the Earth's axis rotates backwards in this spiral top motion, what it's doing is like it's in 2000 years we're not going to be pointing towards Aquarius anymore so you can keep this deep cosmic time by checking where the vernal equinox on where the sun rises on the spring equinox and be like, what zodiac sign is it pointing towards? When the Sphinx was built, I believe we were in the age of Leo. That's why it used to have a lion head, and then somebody at some point built a like person head onto it. But this just shows you that when we are experiencing the chaos of our individual lifetimes, like we can sometimes alleviate the anxiety of the experience we're going through on Earth by understanding that we are in bigger cycles of time. Our individual life cycles are pieces of sand that create the beach of human collective evolution, which is happening on a much larger time scale than just the lifetimes we live. And so the precession of the equinoxes gives us this pictorial cosmic understanding that we are in these bigger cycles. And the entire revolution of the precession through the entire wheel of the zodiac is called a great year. It takes about 25,000 years and change. And so each zodiacal age, as we're now kind of somewhere in the amorphous cusp of moving from the age of Pisces, moving into the age of Aquarius, we are entering a new 22,000 and change year cycle that's going to take us into a different archetypal experience as a human collective. It's pretty fucking interesting, to me at least. So you may also have heard like, oh, we're in the Kali Yuga. If you've heard of the Vedic conception of the yugas, deep eras within time, and there is a correlation to the yugas and the precession of the equinoxes. There are eras of the yugas of the golden age, yugas of the silver age, yugas of the bronze age, yugas of the Iron Age, and then there are the dark times, the Kali Yuga, when everything burns up and destruction clears the way for a new age of ascension or descension. And so this just shows like duality, light and dark, forward and retraction, masculine and feminine polarity. All of this is really math, And so how do we understand all of this? Astrology is the tool through which you make story out of math. And again, the macro to the micro, it's how you look at bigger cycles and understand inner cycles. And when you understand your inner world, you can participate with much greater mastery in the external world. So now let's talk about the moon. This is the main topic of this podcast. The moon as the initiatrix of cycles. So if you can journey with me back a million years when there were anatomically modern humans, but we didn't have clocks, we definitely didn't have cell phones, and we were just trying to make sense of the world. How did we begin to do that? We paid attention to the patterns of nature, and the most brightest patterns we could hold on to gain some kind of coherence and stability to understand our experience as we tried to survive as humans was to look at the sun and the moon. And so when I talk about the moon as an initiatrix of patterns, what I'm really saying, or what I should say, is that the moon and the sun are always in some form of relationship with one another. The moon's illumination is a reference point into what phase of relationship she's in with the sun. And so as we understand the moon and her cycle, we then get initiated into understanding deeper cycles. And so let's talk about the three things the moon can really help us understand. So the moon is going through her 28-day lunation cycle, but she's also going through a larger cycle. She's going through a yearly cycle as well as the 28-day lunation cycle. We're going to dive into both. But what we can understand through this is three things. How we can practice emotional mastery through paying attention to, in training with, and developing our own relationship with the moon and her 28-day cycle. So that's emotional mastery. We'll talk about how you do that. Then we have archetypal mastery. So the zodiac as a wheel of 12 archetypes is a representation of the entire cycle of growth, development, death, and rebirth of human consciousness that we can understand in our own inner worlds, and then we can start to see playing out around us in the external world. The moon in her yearly cycle is how we begin to practice archetypal mastery within ourselves, and then really get to participate with it at a larger scale externally. And then as we understand the moon and those two levels of awareness that she helps us understand, we then start to see that the moon, as she goes through her cycles, she's just mirroring the greater cycles that the other planets in our solar system are going through with each other. Because just as the moon and the sun are in relationship to each other, all other bodies in our cosmos are in relationship to each other as well. And they are also in different levels of cycles together. So we're going to talk about how to understand cosmic cycles using the moon as our hand holder, our initiatrix. And so what do those cosmic bodies, at this point we're talking about the planets that are closer to Earth, the planets of the human psychological conscious world, and then Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, the further out planets that help us understand the consciousness of the human collective unconscious. We'll dig into all of that in a second. But by understanding our personal natal transits and then global transits, which I'll give you tools and links to how you can actually understand what personal natal transits you're going through in the description. But by understanding the personal natal transits that we are going through, and when I say that, what I mean is you have your birth chart and you have where all the planets were in the sky when you were born. That's like a snapshot of the archetypal energy of the moment you became a living piece of consciousness. You incarnated into a body of consciousness. So you carry the seed potential of that archetypal map. In your lifetime is an opportunity to develop yourself into a synthesized whole of that archetypal energy and cultivate your inner world, and then you'll see it expressed in the outer world to the highest octave of all of those individual archetypes that as you synthesize them become the archetype of you as an individual, the archetype that has never been seen before ever in deep time in the cosmos and will never return again, because the solar system, the Earth, is never in the same place ever. And you can see that in the video I've linked at the beginning that I referred to. And so when the cosmic bodies continue to move, Saturn's moving, Mars is moving, when you look at your personal natal transits, what you can see is that when currently a planet is somewhere in the sky, it is making a geometric relationship or aspect. It is showing you what phase it is in to the planets in your birth chart. And so it's basically shining a spotlight on some form of development that your consciousness is going through. And it can be complex. Like if you had to look all this up in a book, you would never do it. That's why I built Starlight, because it's a tool that gives you all these calculations and then interprets the archetypal meaning of them, just like by, using your fingers and going on your phone and like, boom, it's there. And so what do you learn by practicing and participating with the archetypal clues of development that your personal natal transits are giving you? You are practicing psychological mastery. This is like truly coming into the mystical level of the highest potentiality that you came here to like do the damn thing for in this lifetime. It's amazing. Okay, so let's actually get into the meat. Thank you for participating and listening to me kind of like set all this up for you. Now let's dive into the meat of this topic. I'm just going to have a little sip of water because this requires me to talk a lot. But I love it. Like this stuff just keeps me up at night. I'm so fascinated by it. And the fact that you can use this stuff to actually change your life. Like, look, I'll just a little side rant. I love internet astrology. Astrology memes are hilarious. Like I send them to my friends and I laugh at them and they are cool. But what I don't see happening with internet astrology is like showing you what you actually do with it. Like, how do you make this cool topic that I loved astrology since I was a kid. I didn't really know how to get into it. I didn't know what it was for. I just knew I gravitated towards it. It's probably because I have 4 planets in Scorpio and I'm just like into the occult, like as a base level thing in my brain. But astrology isn't just that. Astrology literally is a technology. And if you're familiar with, ancient thinkers, like they were using this in ancient Greece. If you were a mathematician, if you were an individual of a high study of science, you were studying math, you were studying geometry, you were studying astronomy, and you were studying astrology. All the kings and all the queens and all the emperors and all the pharaohs, they had astrologers. I've been finishing a biography of John Dee, a high-level cosmic magus, like the archetype of the magician, who was Queen Elizabeth's like one of her closest advisors. He created navigational tools that he gave to like the pirates that were like fucking sailing around the ocean, which like scares the shit out of me. So it's only kind of been in the last 400 or so years since the Renaissance, since there was a break away from kind of like old style religion, which, I mean, we fucking needed a break from. That shit was crazy. And so there was this kind of like severing of the mystical from the collective experience, because in a lot of ways, like religion had taken the personal relationship out of mystical relationships, like you developing a personal relationship with nature and understanding that there's more to what meets the eye of what's going on in our realities. And it commoditized it and it turned it into a power structure that was highly involved with money and wealth and the hoarding and gathering of wealth. So it makes sense why astrology has kind of been pushed to the realm of the woo-woo and to the realm of superstition. But I think it's time to reclaim the power that astrology allows us to develop within ourselves, a personal relationship of power, because you don't need anything more than the data to start practicing astrological development in your world. And when I say astrological development in your world, what I really mean is conscious development, because we're talking about how the cosmos mirrors our psyches. And if we practice and take an active role in developing our psyches, we're developing our consciousness. And the science of consciousness is getting so popular. There's like 1 billion podcasts on the science of consciousness. I just don't see very many of them using astrology as a tool to actually get an understanding of that. You can't just like take a like an electronic meter and like hook it up to your earlobes or something and get a picture of your actual individual psyche. You might get like the electric brain waves, but to get the archetypal understanding, you need something else for that. And that's what astrology is. So thanks for letting me do that little rant. Now let's get into the moon and how she initiates us into understanding emotional mastery, archetypal mastery, and psychological mastery. And we're going to start this journey by talking about the moon and her 28-day lunation cycle. And she teaches us two things in her 28-day quick lunation cycle, because we can practice trying to understand more about this cycle every month, every 28 days. So we just had a new moon in Aquarius the other day, and I gave this same lecture to this group. I think I did it a little bit faster, but now that I'm just like here on my own podcast, I'm not rushing myself as much. But there's so much to talk about. So okay, whenever you listen to this podcast, just pretend you're at a new moon. So in terms of emotional mastery, we can kind of even break that down into two levels of awareness. We can understand the path of creative growth of things that we want to make real, dreams we want to make real, and then how we understand our actual emotional vicissitudes and like ups, downs, cycles that we go through. So let's talk about first how the moon helps us understand the development of the creative process. So pretending we're here at the new moon in Aquarius, the moon, when it's new, it's called a conjunction. And so pay attention to these words because they'll help us understand psychological mastery when we talk about your personal natal transits later on. But a conjunction is when the moon is 0 degrees away from the sun. This is where the sacred geometry, the math gets into the picture. So when the moon and sun are right together, there's no illumination of the moon because she's not far enough away from the sun to like be reflecting light back to the earth. How does this help us understand the creative process? I often relate astrology to gardening. I'm a gardener myself. Gardening is one of the ways I became even more fascinated with astrology. And so if you are thinking of being a farmer or a gardener, just putting yourself in that archetypal position, they have to go through an entire creative cycle to get the fruit, to bring the seed idea to fruition. So that's what the conjunction aspect helps us understand. And this will be helpful when we talk about personal natal transits in a minute. So here we are with the new moon in Aquarius. When the moon is passing by the sun, and the sun is in the zodiac sign of Aquarius, it's picking up the vibes of the Aquarian archetype, but they haven't been brought to fruition yet. It's just in its seed. It's pure potentiality. It's pure idea. Nothing's brought into form. But then 2.5 days later, the moon is no longer new. She's moved. She's now a waxing crescent. So we're going to talk about the two hemicycles of the moon. The moon is either waxing or she's waning. Or she's either new or full, but that's like geometrically or like mathematically for just like a second that she's either one of those. So basically she's either growing or she's dying. And so when the moon is a waxing crescent, that's like when you start to be like, okay, when the moon was new, you were just imagining what the fruition process, what the end result would look like. But when it gets to a crescent, that's when you're like, okay, I'm starting to see a little bit more detail about what this dream, in this instance, this example, what this Aquarian dream would be for me. For me, I made the intention at the new moon in Aquarius that I'm going to learn deeper ways to use social media, use my voice, use technology, whether that's AI or whatever it is, to get my message of collective evolution, how I desire to participate in the betterment of humanity at the collective level. I'm going to use technology in any way I can find to democratize my voice. I have Aquarius in my chart in the 3rd house of communication. So that's just an example of how I'm actually tangibly using this moon cycle to get emotional mastery out of this practice, but also archetypal mastery. Okay, so as the moon moves into the crescent phase, you're starting to be like, okay, like I'm seeing a little bit more visual reality of how this dream is coming to fruition. Then when the moon gets to its first quarter stage, that's a square. The moon is now 90 degrees away from the sun. It's reflecting half of the light that it potentially can reflect back to the earth. it also looks like a half moon. It was a half moon. It's a first quarter moon. And so it almost represents like a cutting, like the blade of a knife. And how you can think of this archetypally is like if you are building a dream, there's going to come a point of tension in the creative process of building your dream when you're going to have to look back to the tyings of the past that are tying you to old ways of doing things, crystallized structures that no longer serve your highest growth or your highest good. And you're going to have to like kind of push off from the edge of the pool and use your strength to move away, far enough away from the inertia of the past to build the actual dream of the future. And so when you're at this square phase, whether it's a square of the moon or a square in any other cosmic body relationship, it's a point of tension. Old style astrology calls this like a negative aspect, but like if you really think about cycles as part of the creative process, there's no negative part of any cycle. There are just different parts, and you can meet it with your highest good. You can meet it with the most positive agency that you can, while not holding yourself to a standard of perfection. But in that square phase, that's really where it's almost like where you go to Home Depot and you're like, I got to buy the stuff to build the thing that I've designed, and then actually start doing the damn thing and start taking the action. So it's a real crisis in action. And it might feel tensious, but when you move through tension, you learn a lot. And so that's why, as you move through creation processes, you learn immense amounts about yourself, your psychology, the way you can trust yourself to build your dreams. And so that's really what that waxing square phase helps us understand, is that tensious building, but there is a payoff. Then as the moon moves 120 degrees away from the sun, that's where we get to a trine phase. And that is where when you're visually looking at the moon at that phase, it's a waxing gibbous. It's like getting fuller. It looks pregnant with possibility. And it's a real, like the dream is actually starting to become real. And if you have positively participated in the process at this stage, then you have like you have positive inertia, positive movement behind you. And so this is where you're going to be like making small refinements and tweaks to because you're about to land at the full moon in a few days, and you want to do everything you can to just make it the best fruition possible. So when you get to the 180-degree stage of the moon moving away from the sun, that's when the moon is full in her silver glory. And what she's showing us there is the fruition of the efforts of your creative process. You now, whatever that idea, that seed idea that you had at the new moon phase, is now fully available for your use. You have the actual flower in hand. You've grown the seed out to its highest potentiality. And if you didn't participate positively in the process, and you kind of didn't meet it with courage and didn't meet it with your highest good, then it's going to be a time of kind of reflection of what didn't go well, what do you need to release, because you have more chances to practice whatever it is you're trying to bring into form. And so then as the moon moves off of the full position and she starts her waning phase, where she is dying, if you will. But remember that dying is only a process of the entire wheel of the cyclic creative process that will then become an input to a new birth and a new cycle. So as the moon moves into a waning trine, a gibbous moon, a waning gibbous, that's when you're dispersing all of the good and power that you grew to fruition in the full moon. And now how do you use that power? So that's when you start to understand, maybe if you're talking about the Aquarian archetype, how are you using the fruition of that Aquarian archetype to affect your goals? And then when the moon moves to a last quarter, a square, she's halfway full in the sky. She's halfway illuminated in the sky. That's when you have almost a crisis of consciousness of how do I really use the gifts that I grew to its full potential at the full moon for the collective good? And as the moon moves into a waning crescent, also called a balsamic moon, it's the last illumination before the moon is new again and initiates a new cycle. It's really like the seed conscious, starting to develop the seed consciousness, where you're packing in all of the information of everything you learned in that specific creative cycle, and it's going to be an input to the new new moon, when the moon moves 30 more degrees and becomes at 0 degrees relationship with the sun again. So that's the moon's phase in a 28-day cycle, showing us visibly how the creative cycle moves from seed potential to the different tenuous processes of growth to its full illumination, its full fruition, and then how you use that power that you grew as a gardener of your consciousness and disseminate it out into your world and the collective. So as the moon is making those different aspects that we talked about, conjunction, sextile at the crescent, square at the first quarter moon, opposition at the full moon, and then trine, and it just keeps going, because it's going like a clock dial in a circle. The moon is also every 2.5 days moving through the different archetypes of the zodiac, the different constellations of the zodiac. So now the moon was full or new in Aquarius 2 days ago. Now the moon is in Pisces. And so in 2.5 days later, the moon is going to be in Aries, and then the moon's going to be in Taurus and Gemini, and so on and so forth. So if you have the tools to track where the moon is, which you can get in Starlight, little plug for my really gorgeous, beautiful astral grimoire of an astrology app, you will always know what phase the moon is in. You'll always know what sign the moon is in. And what's really interesting as we begin to understand that we can practice emotional mastery, and the payoffs for becoming an emotional master of your inner world are unquantifiable. Because then you'll be able to participate in life, and you're not a slave to your emotions. You can respond rather than react. And so understanding that your emotional world is fast moving, it's fast changing, it's mysterious, but as you understand how to work with it, you don't control it. You understand how to work with it, how to be a partner with it. And so as the moon moves into different phases of the moon and transits different zodiac signs every 2.5 days, pay attention to how you are feeling when the moon is in that sign. And there are archetypal correspondences, obviously, between all of the signs and the elements, and each one of them represent a specific development of each element, which I'll go into in another podcast. And if you check out my podcast on the 12 signs of the zodiac, we go into that at a much greater level of detail. But so if you participate in 28 days, just pay attention to what zodiac sign the moon is in each one. And you can really start to track your emotions. On the days that the moon is in water signs, maybe you're more emotional, you're paying attention, your intuition is heightened, you're having a deeper relationship with your inner world. On days when the moon is in fire signs, Aries, Leo, Sagittarius, maybe you're like, oh, these are the days I want to take action. It's like I'm moving forward, I'm feeling fiery, I'm feeling passionate and bold. When the moon is in earth signs, Taurus, Virgo, Capricorn, you're like, I want to be at home, maybe. I want to be like practically building my dreams, like bringing structure to things, a little bit more masculine containment. And then when the moon is in air signs, maybe you're feeling very communicative. When it's in Gemini or Libra or in Aquarius, you want to communicate with the outer world. You want to gather data. You're feeling very curious. So just by participating in the moon cycles at that level, I'm telling you, you are going to become a higher level emotional master of your inner world, and that pays extremely tangible benefits as you are building your dream life in the external. And so that kind of covers the moon and her 28-day cycle. And again, the beauty of the moon being this quick moving body, it allows us to over and over again get more refinement in our emotional mastery. And so the moon, so that's her 28-day cycle that we can participate in over and over again. But the moon also has a yearly cycle that allows us the opportunity to practice archetypal mastery, something that takes a little bit longer, bigger lessons, bigger power, bigger benefit, bigger payout. And so the moon was just new in Aquarius a few days ago, but the moon is not going to be full in Aquarius until she reaches her opposite sign of Leo. That's when you'll actually have the full moon in Aquarius. If you've been following my account for a bit, you might remember that I did a new moon spell in the new moon in Scorpio, initiating myself into the next level of my evolution. I'm a Scorpio. That's where my sun sign is. I have Mercury, Jupiter, and Venus also in Scorpio conjunct my sun. So I took the opportunity of that new moon to do a spell, and you can use the moon. The moon is our initiatrix into cycles, but she was also our partner in magic and spell casting. And so I cast a spell for myself that I also sent to my email list, where I said, I am going to use this 6-month cycle of the waxing moon in Scorpio. When she's new, it was like November 1st, she was new in Scorpio, but she's not going to be full in Scorpio until Taurus season, May 12th. So this entire time I've been in training myself with the archetype of Scorpio, the change maker, the archetype that allows parts of itself that no longer serve to die off so that you have room to build the new level of your consciousness. That archetype of scuba diving to your inner depths and finding the gold of your shadows and alchemizing them into the gifts. So I've been doing that in the background this whole time. And in Aquarius, we're actually in the square of my Scorpio spell for myself. So I'm actually in the greatest period of tension, but it's a crisis in action. I am taking steps to build the new version of myself. And I'm going to do another podcast that is specifically on this topic of like, what does it feel like to be in the square of a spell? What does it feel like to be in the tensious part of building where you're like, oh man, the past, like my comfort level zones, my old patterns that don't serve me, that I gained when I was unconscious, are trying to pull me back, scaring me from my new growth. But am I going to let that win? Fuck no. So you're going to hear a podcast that I'm going to drop in a few days that really talks about that experience of participating with understanding the archetype of Scorpio at a deeper level, because it's helping me birth the new version of myself. I'm moving from Scorpion to Eagle, which is the 3-level archetypal representation of the archetype of the Scorpio, is like the scorpion, the eagle, the phoenix. And then I'm going to do another podcast when we get to the full moon in Scorpio, talking about what did I learn? How did I bring to fruition the seed ideal, the pure potentiality of the Scorpio archetype? So more on that to come. But that just goes to show you how you can use the moon's yearly cycle, where the moon waxes for 6 months until it becomes full in its sign, in the opposite sign. And so with the new moon in Aquarius, Aquarius is opposite on the wheel of the zodiac from the zodiac of Leo. And so how do you kind of understand those two pieces of information, those two archetypes? What they want is integration of those archetypes. So some of the shadows of Aquarius, it cares deeply about the collective, but almost so to the point that it can get detached from like the actual individual people level of things. Leo, on the other hand, is where you're getting a fire sign of displaying your individuation that you have practiced from Aries all the way to Leo. So there's biological development in the understanding of astrology, and then there's individual development, and then there's collective development. That's something I talk about more in the Zodiac episode podcast that I did. But Leo, the way you can get a beautiful integrative balance of the archetype of Aquarius and the archetype of Leo. Leo wants to be generous. It wants to be seen by the people. It cares deeply about the people when it's tuned right. Aquarius cares about the people too, but it's a lot more on a collective scale. And so if you get this generous, like swarming sun golden retriever energy from Leo, and this extremely like forward thinking, what is the best of the new consciousness that I can bring into the world of the Aquarian archetype, and they meet in the middle in a point of integration, that's when you can really get balance of the best of those both two worlds. And so then when the moon is full in a sign, you start to begin the waning process of that archetypal mastery, that archetypal entrainment. So my hope is that because I also did a spell for entraining myself into the best of the Aquarian archetype 2 days ago when the moon was new in Aquarius. So I have this contemplative plan that I'm going to be allowing to marinate in my consciousness, and I'm going to take action towards it. That will come to fruition when the moon is full in Aquarius in Leo season. By that time, I hope to have many more episodes of my podcast. By that time, I hope to be a master of social media at a greater level of fluidity. I hope that my voice has been able to communicate my highest ideals of new consciousness that come through my intuition and my channel. And I hope that I have been able to communicate what I hope births for the collective, and how I'm working through social networks and using AI in my app, and just using all of the Aquarian things that I'm going to learn about and participate in and build for myself and my own self and business. And we'll see what happens when the moon is full in Aquarius in Leo season. And then as the moon begins to wane, going back and taking 6 more months until we're back in Aquarius season next January, February. And that's when I will disperse the power that I grew through that first 6-month cycle. And you can do this for every archetype, every new moon. I highly encourage journaling for the moon cycles. It's called astral journaling. You can journal with the new moons. And then when you're at the new moon and you're making your journal of your intentions for in training with that archetype, go back and read your journals from 6 months before the full moon in that same sign. And you just keep doing that. And so this isn't like extremely onerous book study. This is being a participant in the writing of your life story and the skilling up of your mastery in your consciousness. And what astrology helps us do at the base case is participate in the cycles of time, so that through the development of our individual consciousness, we become greater participants in the whole, in the collective story. And so the changes you make in your own consciousness actually help people 10,000 years from now. If you really think about the time wave as like sending ripples out across deep time, it's as mystical as it can get. Okay, so that is archetypal mystery that mastery that we understand through participating in the moon's yearly cycles. Now, how do we use the moon? Like I've been saying, she's an initiatrix into all levels of cycles. So by understanding the physical changes that the moon goes through in her 28-day illumination cycle with the moon, or with the sun, and because she's always in relationship to the sun, it's a solely lunar relationship cycle. We also realize that all of the planets in our solar system are in some phase of relationship to each other. So this is where you want to take a look. Get on my free email list, because you'll get your personal natal transit sent to you every day. It is the most valuable, like, free email I think you can get in the world. Like, I'm just going to say that. I did a shitload of coding with my astrological API service. And then, like, as soon as you give me your email and your birth date and stuff, boom, you're going to get an email that gives you every phase of relationship that planets are going through in the sky right now and how they are relating to your birth chart, with a custom interpretation of what lesson you can learn from that. And they're all ranging, so it'll give you your moon relationships, like where the moon is in the sky right now. It'll tell you where the moon is and what relationship she's making to your natal chart. That is super fascinating to understand when we are going through eclipse cycles, and we're about to go through a new eclipse cycle. I think the next eclipse is the full moon in Virgo, which is going to be the first moon in Virgo as we enter the lunar nodal change. And that is March 15th or 14th, I think. And so when you are in an eclipse season, understanding what aspects the moon, where it currently is making to your natal chart, will help you get a little bit more tangible details of the changes that are happening in your life. Eclipse seasons are when magic just kind of like happens. It's like the veil is thin, magic is afoot. And so that is a fascinating way to see what's going on there. And then when we start talking about the closer in planets of the consciousness, Mercury and Venus. Mercury is the fast-moving planet of the intellect and communication. Understanding what aspects Mercury, in whatever sign it's in right now, is making to your natal chart helps you understand, like, well, how is your intellectual function, your communication function showing up for you right now? And that helps you sharpen your intuition. This whole situation, this whole methodology is about sharpening your intuition so you can make decisions. I can't snap with my left finger or left hand. So you can make instantaneous, intellectually relevant and accurate decisions, moving you towards the highest story you're trying to tell with your life. So then when we're talking about planets like Mars, wherever Mars is in the sky right now and the aspects it's making to your natal chart, that helps you understand what season of action taking are you in, so that you know, like, okay, is this action aligned with the kind of action I should be taking right now for building my highest story? Yes or no, you make the decision, you move yourself forward in your story. You make relevant progress with true good action. And that, because Mars is the masculine polarity of in relationship with Venus, the quality of action you take directly correlates to the receptivity of beauty and love in your life. So if you're paying attention and positively participating with Mars in the way you take action, your life is going to be beautiful. It's going to be filled with love and abundance. Then as you move to planets like Saturn and Jupiter, further out planets of the consciousness, Saturn in wherever it's aspecting your current chart, if you're going through your Saturn return, you should absolutely get on my personal natal transits email. It's going to be critical for you not feeling so lost in the chaos of what your Saturn return might throw at you if you're not in a state of conscious awareness. So when you understand archetypally where Saturn is in the sky right now and how it is reflecting to the transits of your Saturn return, you can have the cosmic weather. It's like, if it's going to be raining, shining, or sleet or snow. Whether to stay home or go out. And just having that as an opportunity to get the detailed farmer's almanac level of how your consciousness wants to be gardened, the long-term cumulative benefits of this are that you become a master. You become a psychological master because you have met your development with your foot forward. And, play that story out over decades. The you at 90 years old, 120 years old, ready to meet your death, are you in a state of panicked regret because you didn't leave it all on the table in this lifetime? Or do you have a smile of the one who knows that they did push all the fucking chips into the middle of the table and you lived your story like a sailor of the high fucking seas? Which one do you want? I know what I've picked, the choice I've made. And this is a tool, this is a navigational tool to help me stay on that for decades. Live in the day, plan in decades. That's how you live a great life story. And then when we talk about the planets of the collective unconscious, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, those are big psychological shifts that you're going to go through. I've gone through a ton of Pluto, Neptune, and Uranus, Neptune, Pluto transits in the last 4 years. I'm a millennial. I'm an elder millennial. I'm 42. But I actually feel the best. I'm in the best health. I'm in the best emotional shape. I'm in the coolest part of my story I've ever been in. And I know people who aren't because they're not meeting their story with consciousness. But because I've been able to pay attention to the archetypal initiations that Pluto wanted me to go through, because I was in my Pluto square Pluto, which is a transit that everyone meets in their early 40s. Then I had my Neptune square Neptune. I'm about to have my Uranus opposition. I had Uranus it's currently conjunct my Chiron in Taurus. I'm learning a ton about Uranus. Is the planet of like rebellion against the old. It's the tractor rotary blade that tears up the soil to like loosen old structures and make way for the new dreams that Neptune is going to seed through your intuitive channel. I'm in the thick of things with initiating myself into a new cycle of self-belief. Having Chiron in Taurus, I've struggled with not believing in myself, not believing my work was worth it, because I have Chiron in Taurus in the 6th house of like my daily work. How is my service relevant to the collective? How is my day-to-day life sustainable? Like, how does my work relate to a sustainable lifestyle? I've been going through all of those conscious upgrade awareness. It's not always easy, but it is always productive if you meet conscious change with an open heart and like a desire to improve yourself. Constant evolution, lifelong learner shit. So paying attention to your personal natal transits and understanding that a transit means like nothing is ever static. Nothing is ever stagnant. Things are always moving. The cosmos is always moving. And the moon is that initiatrix that helps us understand all of these lasagna levels of cosmic change that we can use as a pattern to understand our internal change and create our dream worlds. I can't say that enough. So yeah, there we have really taken a tour of emotional mastery that is so valuable, and it will pay dividends for the rest of your life. We've taken a tour of archetypal mastery. How do you understand every archetype of the zodiac? Because you not only have every archetype of the zodiac within you, but you will start to see the stories of other people, other characters that come into your life, and you'll see what archetype they are mirroring back to you. And as you move through, if you take my advice, which I highly recommend, and start journaling on every new moon. This isn't just for witches. I wish dudes would do this. Like I wish dudes would understand astrology so much, because the amount of intimacy that we would be able to have with each other in platonic relationships, in romantic relationships, in business partnerships, we become able to speak story to story. When you have an astrological language capability installed in you, which doesn't take that long. Like if you spent the 20 minutes a day you spent on Instagram just going into Starline, my app, and understanding astrological archetypal language just through osmosis, it's as fun to read as anything you're going to find on Instagram, and it helps you understand yourself better. That if you are a man and you're in your masculine energy and you have trouble communicating with women, or you have trouble understanding us, we get lost so much, I think, in relationships because we're using language. And language is a high level technology, but language is not done in its evolution of a technology. Because we're using, as Terence McKenna says, our small mouth noises to try and communicate to each other. And we get lost in the politics of dialogue, the politics of words, but archetypes are universally recognizable symbols and patterns of human behavior. So when you move language up to the archetypal level of understanding, what you're doing is you're taking that algebra up to a higher level of making sense. Someone who speaks Chinese and someone who speaks Italian, they could meet much more easily in the middle because they're speaking at the level of archetypes. So yeah, that's just a plug for dudes one day eventually understanding astrology and like getting out of their left brain that thinks that they have to be able to understand everything with the seventh decimal of a mathematical calculation for it to be valid. Use your right brain, bros. Like, this is the invitation. You'll have better sex. You'll get more women, because women will want to be with you because you'll be a better communicator. Like, what's cooler than that? And so, yeah, we have now traveled emotional mastery, archetypal mastery, and psychological mastery. And what this does is it makes you a magical person. It makes you a high level magus. Again, I've been reading this book, the biography of John Dee, a Renaissance era magician who was a scientist. He spoke at the best universities in England, and he developed new science of navigation, science of using the stars to be like, oh, you're on a ship? Well, here's an astrolabe. You can figure out the latitude, longitude. It was like highly secret technology that the English Navy had, that other cultures hadn't developed yet. But he was also an astrologer. People forget that astrology is not just like, didn't get invented by Glamour magazine and bullshit sun sign horoscopes. Like, astrology is absolutely a technology of a cosmic level. So anyway, I really enjoyed going through this tour of cycles with you today. It is one of the most critical levels of awareness that you can have to understand astrology as a technology for living your best life. And it helps us understand our place in deep time as an individual. Like, when we think of our individual lifetimes, like we can get really myopic and get really roughed up in the washing machine of chaos of our individual lives. But if we understand that we are part of divine deep time, that mystical thinkers have been thinking of this for thousands and thousands of years. And you can see that in the tradition of the Vedic yugas. You can see that in how ancient cultures built their megalithic structures aligned to cosmic bodies and to the zodiacal placements in our solar system. So it just reminds us that we are all part of it. Like, we are all in a state, whether we like it or not, or whether we feel it or not, in any given moment, we are all in a state of unified relationship with each other. But we are also in a state of trying to find coherence in the chaos. And astrology is the most mystical, grandest, most valuable system for finding your inner coherence so that you can bring that service to the outer world and find deep gratification as you become a master of your life. All right. Toodles.